Something strange is going on as over the last few days, multiple reports have linked a veteran wide receiver in the National Football League to the Denver Broncos. And although this so-called veteran wide receiver has had a tough last few years as far as his career in the NFL goes, the reports around this specific player, how he links to the Denver Broncos, as well as some other reports with him being linked to other teams, all has huge implications looking forward as the Broncos look to potentially add some depth to their wide receiver room and just their offense in general. We're going to dive into everything surrounding this report today, talk about what all of the conversation is surrounding this specific player and how he links to the Denver Broncos and what this would look like if the Broncos decided to somehow add him to their roster, as we're about at the halfway point in the NFL season this year. How's it going, everybody? Mark Robinson here with Broncos Digest. Happy to be here breaking down all things Denver Broncos football with you. As I just said, we're about at the halfway point of the NFL season. Broncos are 4-2 as they head into a pretty big matchup this weekend. Pretty interesting considering the fact that both the Broncos and the Giants were able to give the Eagles their only two losses of the season. And then this weekend, those two teams will clash against each other. So got an interesting matchup. You know, the Mile High Magic will be real. Broncos play very well at home, and they'll be facing Jackson Dart and Cam Scatteraboo at home in Denver, Colorado this weekend. Like I said, we got a really interesting report to dive into today surrounding Treylon Burks, the number 18th overall draft pick a few years back out of the University of Arkansas, whose career has been somewhat of a bust, so to say. And we're going to dive into all of the conversation around him and how he's being linked to the Denver Broncos over the last few weeks, over the last few days, that is. Before we do that, I want to make sure to remind you guys that you are subscribed to Broncos Digest. 96% of you guys not subscribed to the channel and watching our views on a daily basis. So if you're part of that 96%, if you're watching our videos, if you're a Broncos fan, if you're a football fan, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you're locked and loaded and ready to go to get all of the Broncos news that you need here at Broncos Digest. All right, without further ado, let's dive into this report from Ian Rappaport last week. A report saying that the former Titans wide receiver Treylon Burks is newly available and one of the top free agents, and he's planning to visit the Broncos next week. This was a report that came out last week, and everything that we're going over today is essentially a developing story over the last few weeks. The former first rounder is likely to take other visits after receiving significant interest as being, like Ian Rappaport said, one of the top free agents on the market. So just a quick little recap on Treylon Burks and his career. We're going to first look at some of his college stats in 2020 and 2021, playing for the University of Arkansas in the SEC as a wide receiver at sophomore and junior year. He had 9 games and 12 games in the sophomore and the junior year, respectively. 51 receptions and 66 receptions, 820 and 1,104 yards. Averaged about 16.1 yards per run, and then 16.7, and then 7 and 11 touchdowns, respectively. So a pretty significant career at the University of Arkansas. Pretty solid play as a sophomore and a junior. Went and looked at some of his highlights and some of the plays that he was able to make playing for the Razorbacks, and he was a very strong asset for Arkansas back in his college days. And then looking at his career with the Tennessee Titans, definitely a little bit of a drop-off. Obviously, some injury involved and some speculation around whether or not he was able to be playing at his full potential with the quarterback and the team that he was playing with. I'm going to dive a little bit into that in just a little bit as well. But looking down the line here in his 3 seasons with the Tennessee Titans, he had 33 receptions, 16 receptions, and 4 receptions, respectively. 441 yards, 221 yards, and then 34 yards. 1 touchdown, and then no touchdowns after that. Like I said, too, he did have some injuries going on in that time frame as well. But you can kind of see that the number 18th overall pick by the Tennessee Titans had a significant drop-off in his career, and then the Titans released him ahead of the 2025 season, which is why he has been looking for his next landing spot and essentially is the top free agent on the market right now for teams that are looking to add some wide receiver depth. So Treylon Burks, number 18 overall pick in the 2022 NFL draft. He tore his ACL in practice last year, and then broke his collarbone during a training camp practice session in July. That resulted in the Titans essentially being quote unquote fed up with what was going on with him as far as production and injury go. And they waived Burks and sent him to waivers and put him on the market for any team that's looking to add wide receiver depth now that the season is fully underway. And then just something that I wanted to dive into a little bit is I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the quarterbacks that we've seen Treylon Burks play for while he was at Tennessee, because there's been a lot of talk in the media about if he wouldn't have been as much of a bust if he was playing for a much more high caliber offensive team. His three quarterbacks that he primarily played for with the Titans were Ryan Tannehill, Will Levis, and Malik Willis. And I have to say, I honestly agree with these speculations and these comments in the media. I think that putting a very high caliber receiver that had very strong numbers and the numbers that prove that he's a good wide receiver at Arkansas, I think putting him on an offense with a much more efficient quarterback and just an efficient offensive system would allow him to break through and reach the potential that everybody knew he potentially had when getting drafted by the Titans and when becoming an NFL player. I think that playing for some of these quarterbacks, low end of the league and not as much skill, I don't think that it allowed him to break through as a wide receiver in the NFL. And I think that that's part of the reason that we saw his numbers drop off so much once he reached the NFL out of the college level. So talking a little bit about the Broncos and their offense, we know that this has been a defensively dominant season. We've talked about it on the channel. It's just kind of the way that the Broncos have functioned this year. It's been the theme of the team through 6 weeks. The Broncos passing attack has been pretty disappointing from Bo Nix this season thus far. It's number 16th in the NFL. 206.8 passing yards per game is their average. The wide receiver one, Courtland Sutton's the only wide receiver that's averaging over 42 yards per game. Bo Nix completed just 4 of 10 passes for 49 yards in the second half of the, what we talked about the other day on this channel, ugly win over the New York Jets on Sunday in the London game. His 88.2 passer rating is number 24 in the NFL as it stands right now. So adding a guy like Treylon Burks could help with the Broncos and their offensive rating and their passing yards per game rating. And it could also give Bo Nix some more weapons in the backfield to utilize. Obviously, right now, he's got guys like Courtland Sutton, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, to name a few, as well as some strong tight end talent in Nate Adkins and Evan Ingram. But adding a player like Treylon Burks could give Bo Nix some more leeway and essentially some more people to use as far as offensive production goes. But the most strange aspect of this whole situation, hence the title of this video, that something strange is going on, is that Treylon Burks is now, as of this morning, visiting the Washington Commanders and having talks with them about a potential contract there. He's already had his visit with the Denver Broncos, spoke with the management, spoke with the coaching staff, and he left Denver unsigned. So the strange thing about this whole situation is if the Broncos are looking to add wide receiver depth, and they already had talks with Treylon Burks and he already left unsigned and went and flew to another team to have talks with the Commanders, does that mean that this situation is completely ixnayed, or is there still a potential that he's going to leave Washington and come back and sign with Denver? And are we going to somehow see him being added to the Broncos roster looking forward into the future? So an interesting situation considering that he's one of the top free agents on the market right now. And if the Broncos are looking to add some offensive depth and make some moves as far as adding offense to their depth chart, this would be a pretty solid move in my opinion. I know there's a lot of speculation and a lot of differing opinions around whether or not Treylon Burks would be a strong offensive add for any team. But I do agree that putting him on an offense alongside guys like Courtland Sutton and Bo Nix and with an offensive line that is very efficient, I think that Treylon Burks would add a lot of skill and depth to the Denver Broncos, but it's a strange situation considering he left Denver unsigned and he's now in talks with Washington. And I think you can make the same argument about him, that if you put him on an offense with Jaden Daniels, who's doing very well as a rookie quarterback so far, they're also pretty injured right now too. that could be another interesting an interesting landing spot for Treylon Burks in this, so to say, strange situation surrounding the wide receiver free agent and whether or not he's going to end up with the Denver Broncos and just what this situation looks like looking forward. So anything that's developing and going on within the conversation around Treylon Burks, we will keep you updated as always here at Broncos Digest. Any sort of free agent news, any sort of Broncos news in general, we are keeping you updated every single day. So make sure that you're subscribed, make sure that you're liking the videos, and make sure you leave a comment, on this video specifically. Let us know what you think of Treylon Burks somehow landing with the Denver Broncos, if this is a good move, or if there's something else out there that would potentially work for an offensive addition in this certain part of the season for the Denver Broncos. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. Make sure you're subscribed as usual. Go Broncos, and we will check in with you soon regarding any more news ahead of this weekend's game against the New York Giants.